She said it with a casualness that did not match the weight of the words. "You are holding me back." Not yelled, not whispered, just placed there flat and cold on the surface of a Tuesday morning. She stood by the kitchen sink, twisting the cap onto her protein shake with slow, deliberate movements. It was the same vanilla collagen-laced ritual I had seen 100 times, but that morning she moved like someone auditioning for a new version of herself. Her posture had changed. Her voice smoother. Detached, almost performative. I waited, not because I was stunned, though I was, but because I knew that silence from me would make her explain herself more than any question ever could. She turned around, resting her hip against the counter like a TED speaker warming up for applause. "I mean, you are supportive and all, but I feel like I am growing in a direction and you are not." That was the first moment I knew she had practiced this. Not rehearsed it once, but refined it. Smoothed the edges, rounded the gilt, shaped it into a palatable bullet she could fire without flinching. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone lukewarm. She waited for me to react, but I gave her nothing. I kept my face still, eyes on the space just past her shoulder. I did not ask who she was growing toward, though the thought took shape instantly. Instead, I asked, "When did you start feeling that way?" She blinked. That caught her. She had not expected a calm question. She expected defensiveness, maybe a plea, not data collection. "I do not know," she said, suddenly unsure. "It has been building for a while. You have been so predictable." I let that sit for a beat. Predictable, like trust was a flaw, like stability was something to be outgrown. After breakfast, she left for Pilates, her usual Tuesday 10 a.m. class. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for hearing her, and walked out the door with the calm confidence of someone who thought they were 2 chapters ahead in the script. When the door shut, I stood still for a long time, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at the space where her voice had last echoed. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake, but something in my chest pulled inward like a drawstring bag being closed around something delicate. I did not touch my phone right away. I did not call anyone. Instead, I went to the shared iPad we used for syncing travel plans, calendars, sometimes recipes. She had long forgotten it syncs to her phone, or maybe she thought I had. It was lying on the side table in the living room where she had left it the night before. I opened it and unlocked the screen. Calendar, open, then notifications, nothing at first. Then it lit up. "You are amazing last night, again tomorrow." No name, just a number. Local area code. The kind of message that wears a mask even when it thinks it is alone. I took a screenshot. Then I tapped the message and opened the thread. Not a long one, no declarations of affection or anything that could be forwarded without context, but the pattern was there. Quiet intimacy. Inside jokes I did not understand. Meetups framed as prep or sessions. A message sent late Friday night. "Room 614 again." I stared at that one the longest. It was the specificity that did it. Not the betrayal, not the distance, but the confirmation that this had happened enough to require habit. My body stayed motionless, but my mind began moving fast. I took more screenshots. Then I cross-referenced the last message with our credit card statements on the linked finance app. Nothing there. That, too, made sense. She would not have used our joint card. I searched her personal email. It was still logged in. Buried inside the spam folder was a booking confirmation for a boutique hotel I recognized, walking distance from where her Pilates studio supposedly was. I stared at the booking date. It matched the Friday she had told me she was going to a women's networking dinner. That was the second moment I knew this was not about growth. It was about escape. And she had been planning it long enough to build a paperless trail. She returned from Pilates just after noon. Hair pulled back into a ponytail, face flushed from either exertion or a warm goodbye. She smiled like the morning had never happened. "You hungry?" she asked. "I could make us something." I nodded. "Sure." We had avocado toast. She talked about a new strength coach the studio had brought in, said she was feeling powerful lately, stronger. She used that word twice. I watched her move through the kitchen, noting how she kept glancing at her phone. I asked a few benign questions. She answered easily, casually. There was no guilt in her voice, no discomfort, just the ease of someone who believed their illusion still held. That night after she fell asleep early, citing muscle soreness, I lay awake in the dark, replaying every strange moment from the last month. The quick changes of topic, the phone that never left her hand, the sudden push for separate finances, just in case. She had been laying bricks behind my back, building a version of her life that did not include me, but I had the blueprint now. And I had no intention of standing still while she sealed the exits. I did not sleep that night, not in the way that counts. I lay in bed listening to her breathe, soft and rhythmic beside me as if the day had not split us in half. She curled slightly toward me in her sleep, a muscle memory, not affection. I did not move. By 4 a.m. I was in my office with the iPad, a legal pad, and two monitors open. One showed the synced messages, the other our personal and shared financial records. She had made a mistake not in her secrecy but in her assumption that I would never bother looking. She had two cards in her name. One we shared, the other was older, rarely used. I pulled up the past 3 months, sparse charges, a few from cafes she never mentioned, 2 Uber rides that did not match her calendar locations. But the one that mattered was buried under an alias, a boutique wellness retreat weekend booking, same date as her business mastermind workshop. I searched the property. The photos were almost too perfect. Sunlit balconies, candlelit dining rooms, rooms named after virtues, serenity, resilience, passion. The booking number matched the email I found in her inbox. Room, passion. I made another note, then opened the iPad again. I copied the unknown number from the text thread and plugged it into a reverse lookup tool I used when vetting investors. It bounced through 3 shell registrations, but the 4th attempt gave me what I needed. The number belonged to Thomas B., shortened for branding purposes, co-founder of a regional venture group and one of the earliest investors in my commercial property fund. We had known each other 5 years, had drinks together. He had once met my wife at a holiday party and complimented her red dress, not knowing, or maybe knowing exactly, how much she liked being noticed. A tight burn spread under my ribs. Not rage, not betrayal, something quieter and colder. Precision. He had pulled back from 2 projects in the past month, citing liquidity concerns. At the time, I believed him. Now I saw it for what it was, insulation. If he planned to entangle himself with her professionally or otherwise, he could not afford to be financially bound to me. He was unhooking ties, preparing to reattach elsewhere. I stared at the screen, then began cross-referencing emails from his firm. They had arrived later, more distantly. Less personal, more generic. That alone could have meant nothing, but in context it reeked. The next day I said nothing. She went through her morning with predictable efficiency. I complimented her on a new outfit, form-fitting, bolder than usual. She looked pleased but slightly wary, as if unsure whether to trust my sudden attentiveness. She kissed me goodbye again. Same cheek, same mask. When the door shut, I called an attorney. Not to file anything. Not yet. I wanted advice on asset protection, silent filing procedures, and exploratory legal audits. I had no interest in reaction. This had to be strategy. Quiet, complete, permanent. That night over dinner she mentioned Thomas, casually, almost with effortlessness. Said he had reached out about a possible speaking event she could co-host for female entrepreneurs scaling their power. I nodded. Sounds like a good opportunity. She looked at me with a strange pause. You do not mind? I smiled. Why would I? She looked momentarily unsure, then covered it with another sip of her wine. She had switched from whites to reds lately. I wondered if he liked reds. I wondered what else he had changed in her. That night she got a message around midnight. She thought I was asleep. I was not. The message preview only showed a heart emoji, and thinking of that moment, she clicked it away quickly, tucked the phone under her pillow, and shifted closer to me as if the heat of my body could make her invisible. I closed my eyes and let the image burn itself into memory. By morning I had what I needed: names, numbers, booking data, a clean timeline, enough to form a skeleton of truth. But I was not done. I began recording backups, screenshots, messages, bank exports. I stored them offline under encrypted file names. I did not trust the cloud. Trust had become an extinct concept. That weekend, she invited me to a new wine bar that had opened near the river. Said we should do more couple things. I agreed. She looked genuinely happy, light on her feet, at ease. We shared a charcuterie board. She took a photo of it for Instagram and tagged it with some light-hearted caption about good energy. Her smile looked real. Maybe it was, but it did not matter anymore, because the face she showed the world was already disconnected from the truth she had stitched behind it. And I was not watching anymore. I was documenting. It began with the house. She asked me one evening over dinner if we should consider restructuring ownership of the property. For tax optimization, she said, using a phrase that did not belong to her usual vocabulary. I kept my tone neutral. What did your accountant say? She hesitated. Well, it was just something I read. A lot of couples do it. Less exposure, especially with market volatility. I nodded slowly. She did not have an accountant, at least not until very recently. That night, while she took a bath, I went to the home office and pulled her laptop from its bag. She had started locking it. I already had the code. Her browser history was clean, too clean, wiped systematically. But the system logs told me when she had last cleared it. The pattern was consistent. Every 3 days. She was either paranoid or being advised by someone who knew what to scrub. I dug deeper. Hidden in her downloads folder was a PDF titled Joint Tenancy Tax Loopholes Clean Transfer Models. That phrase echoed what she had said at dinner. I opened it. It was a legal strategy document, well formatted with margin notes highlighted in pale yellow. One section was marked, Pre-Divorce Asset Shielding in Cooperative Jurisdictions. Another, Community Property Reassignment under Amicable Filing Protocols. She was not looking for a clean exit. She was looking for leverage. I backed everything up. The next morning she made me coffee and kissed me on the forehead like we were still normal. I thanked her. Then, while she showered, I printed copies of the document and added them to the growing binder in my locked cabinet. I called my own attorney that afternoon and gave her the context I had been collecting. Not the emotional details. Those would muddy the strategy. I gave her dates, names, financial patterns, and documents. She listened carefully and then said something I had already suspected. She is preparing to sever, but slowly. If she is being advised by a lawyer on the side, they are likely framing it as peaceful disengagement. The catch is, if she gains enough leverage, emotionally, legally, or financially, she will file first and make it look like a cooperative move. And if she files first, I asked, you are reacting, not acting, which means she controls the frame, the timeline, and possibly the court's initial perception. You need to move before she is ready. I thanked her, then asked for everything in writing. A list of preemptive actions, steps I could take quietly without tipping my hand. That night my wife asked if I wanted to take a trip together, just the two of us. She even smiled when she said it. I asked, where to? She shrugged. Somewhere new, you choose. It sounded almost sincere, like someone trying to rediscover something they had misplaced, but I already knew the truth. She was building the illusion of connection so she could claim later that I had failed to meet her halfway. I told her I would think about it. Later that week, she met with a woman named Tessa, an empowerment strategist she had found through an online coaching group. I had heard the name once before, but it did not register until I saw the invoice buried in her email's promotions folder. The services were vague: transformational alignment, emotional leadership, vision anchoring. But the fees were sharp. One session was billed at $900, another at $1,200. The note in the payment said Level 3, Closure Readiness. I felt something cold settle behind my eyes. I searched the group. No official website, no clinical credentials, just social media pages filled with phrases like cut the cords that bind you and become the woman your next life deserves. There were testimonials. Most were divorced. Most had begun the process while still married. She was not lost, she was being led. I began collecting data on the group. I found out who ran it, where it was registered, and how many complaints had been filed under alternate names. Several women had sued. One case was quietly settled last year. Emotional pressure, financial entanglement, encouragement to sever legal ties under the guise of empowerment. It was no longer just her choice. It was a system grooming her into an exit strategy. And I was not simply her husband anymore. I was the anchor they wanted her to cut loose. The worst part, she believed it was her own idea. The pattern had been building for weeks, subtle distance, smoothed over explanations. Familiar affection doled out like measured doses, just enough to suggest things were improving but never enough to rebuild what she had already dismantled. But now I understood. The distance was not accidental. It was architecture, and she was not designing it alone. By the second week of March, I had full confirmation of the number she had been texting. The reverse lookup, the time-stamped messages, the booking emails, it all pointed to Thomas Brenner. We had met 5 years earlier, introduced through a mutual contact in a regional investment group. Thomas liked risk when it looked respectable. He had a clean blazer, a soft voice, and an uncanny ability to remember small details about people's lives. He had remembered the name of my dog after meeting him once. That kind of man. He had also put early capital into my first major commercial renovation, 6 figures that had given me just enough runway to finish the project on schedule. That deal earned us both money and him something else, proximity. I remembered the first time he met her. Holiday event at a wine bar we rented out. She wore a red dress, open back, high neckline, her version of subtle drama. Thomas had made a passing comment about the dress, nothing explicit, just a note of appreciation. He had said, "You know, red like that only works when the person wearing it already knows they belong in it." She had smiled. The kind of smile that lingers longer than it should if you are being faithful to more than one audience. I dismissed it then. Not because I trusted him, but because I trusted her. That version of her, at least. The one that had not yet started asking if I was the person she was supposed to evolve away from. But now, with confirmation in hand, that memory reloaded itself with venom. I did not confront her. Confrontation gives away the power. I simply began rearranging my world quietly. I withdrew from 2 pending acquisitions, projects that Thomas had expressed interest in co-funding. I cited internal restructuring and liquidity rebalance. I rerouted contract oversight through my legal team and assigned NDAs to everyone handling proprietary models. Then I initiated an independent audit of all project funds that had involved him in the past year. It was not retaliation, it was protocol, she noticed. That night she poured wine and asked me if something was wrong. "You have seemed intense lately," I smiled. "Just thinking a lot about legacy, about how easily partnerships change." She tilted her head. "Like our partnership," I sipped my wine, "all of them." There was a flicker of something in her eyes, not guilt, calculation, a momentary flick of mental inventory. What did he know? What had she missed? I let the silence do its job. The next morning she left for a wellness panel downtown, said she would be back by 5. I checked her calendar. The event was real, but her name was not listed as a participant, just an attendee. I called the hotel, room booked under Thomas's name. Same floor as the prior booking. Different room. I did not need to guess the rest. Instead, I called someone I trusted more than anyone, my assistant of 7 years, Maya, sharp, discreet, immune to charm. I told her I needed discreet documentation, time-stamped visual confirmation. No intrusion, just evidence. She handled it without flinching. By evening, I had what I needed, 2 photos clear enough to remove doubt. They exited the lobby separately, but their eyes made the mistake of knowing each other too well. She smiled at him. He touched her lower back, a gesture that only exists between people who have already rewritten the rules. I stored the images in the binder. That night she came home tired, smiling faintly, said the panel was a little superficial. I asked what the highlight had been. She thought for a moment. Probably the part about dissolving self-limiting narratives. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked if she wanted to go away for a weekend, just the 2 of us. Her smile looked rehearsed. "Sure, that sounds great." I already knew she would cancel. I needed her to think I was still holding on, that I was distracted, soft, safe. Because while she thought I was building a romantic escape, I was building a firewall, and the next move would not be hers. By the time I confirmed her connection to the group, I already knew what I would find. Still, reading it in black and white had a different weight. Tessa, the empowerment strategist she had been meeting with, was not a licensed therapist. She operated under a consultancy registered in Delaware, 3 addresses deep, barely compliant but technically clean. The group's full name, Evolve Her Circles. Half wellness, half financial coaching, all wrapped in the language of spiritual alignment and legal detachment. It had a cult's discipline without the overt rituals. Their materials were slippery. Phrases like sovereign clarity, contractual self-liberation, exit empowerment. Everything just vague enough to avoid legal scrutiny, but pointed enough to undermine a marriage if used strategically. And it had been. Through a legal contact, I got access to one of their internal resource packets, leaked during a previous case involving a high-net-worth divorce in Arizona. That client had filed under advice from Evolve Her and lost primary care arrangements after her financial planning was revealed to be strategically coercive. The language mirrored what I had found in my wife's downloaded PDF: emphasis on quiet financial repositioning, altering property lines, pre-negotiating narrative with trusted allies, not just preparing to leave, but staging the exit to look mutual while keeping control. She was not leaving. She was rehearsing a version where I had abandoned her emotionally and she had no choice. And the most bitter irony, she believed it was self-care. That same week, I found a second invoice from Evolve Her, this one larger, $3,800. The description was buried behind coded terms: Level 4 legal framing and circle coaching. I knew what it meant. They were scripting her language, coaching her on how to present herself as the reasonable party, prepping her to say things like, "I tried everything, and he shut down emotionally." It was not just betrayal, it was a narrative being carved in my absence. And then came the final confirmation. I cross-referenced the number that had texted her, the same number I knew belonged to Thomas, with Evolve Her circle access lists. Their encrypted group chats had been scraped in a small breach a few months earlier. That data had since vanished online, but I had contacts who archived everything. I searched the database, found Thomas's number listed under a session with Circle Access Outer Patron, code for male partners funding clients' packages discreetly. He was not just her outside partner, he was funding her legal advantage. That shifted everything. I had been preparing for emotional misalignment, maybe even financial detachment. But this was deliberate collusion. He was not just part of the involvement, he was underwriting the dismantling of my foundation. That night I sat in my office and stared at the timeline I had built: dates, messages, hotel stays, meeting records, invoices, her coaching sessions, Thomas's withdrawal from our projects, the overlapping patterns. I printed every page, paginated them, bound them in a plain black folder. The binder was not just for me anymore. It was evidence, strategy, leverage. The next day, I had my accountant draft preliminary protective documents: asset tracing audits, freeze protocols, legal shielding for intellectual property I had developed. She asked me if something was wrong. I told her I was just being proactive. That afternoon, I placed a call to a trusted contact, an attorney who handled high-profile privacy breaches. I told him I wanted to explore options for exposure without litigation. A way to dismantle a reputation quietly, ethically, but thoroughly. He asked, professional or personal? I said both. He paused, then said, understood. At dinner that night, she made risotto. She had opened a new bottle of wine, said she wanted us to reconnect. Her eyes were soft, voice warm. She had always been good at maintaining illusion until the last possible second. She reached for my hand mid-meal. Thank you for being patient with me. I know I have been elsewhere lately. I kept my eyes on her. Have you? She smiled. Not in the way that matters, I nodded. Not in the way that matters. She believed I still wanted her back, and that belief was going to be the cleanest path to her undoing. I chose the setting carefully. Not our home, not public. Neutral ground, familiar enough to disarm her, quiet enough for clarity. A private dining room at a restaurant we had visited on our anniversary 2 years ago. I reserved the same table. I arrived early. The folder sat in front of me unopened, clean black cover. No labels, no threats, just weight, measured and final. She arrived 5 minutes late, hair pulled into a loose knot, soft navy dress, heels just high enough to suggest she still wanted to be seen. She smiled when she saw me, a version of her that still believed she held the tempo. I thought we could use a night away from everything, she said as she sat. I nodded. I agree. She ordered a red. Same one we used to split before she changed her palette. I did not order anything, not yet. We made small talk for a few minutes. She mentioned a potential workshop she might lead next month, asked if I had made any progress on those restructuring deals I had vaguely mentioned last week. Her tone was light, but her eyes were reading the air. When the waiter brought the wine, I waited for him to leave before I placed my hand on the folder. She paused mid-sip. I want you to listen, I said, voice even. No interruptions, no explanations yet, just listen. She did not move. I opened the folder, first the hotel bookings, Room numbers, confirmation emails, then the photo, her with Thomas outside the lobby. That one I slid forward gently. She stared at it, said nothing. I continued. The message thread printed with timestamps, the cross-reference of her calendar and the emails, the invoices from Evolve Her, the coaching sessions, the descriptions, the payment trails, her attempts to alter ownership on our house. Each page placed in order, a sequence, a narrative no coach could script away. Her face changed slowly, not with guilt but with containment. She had trained for this, prepped responses, visualized outcomes, but the sheer volume, the precision of what I had laid down, was more than she had rehearsed for. Finally, I placed the last page in front of her. The invoice from Thomas to Evolve Her, cross-verified through back-end metadata. Proof that he had funded her strategy. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. You went through everything. I nodded once. Everything you thought I would never look at. She stared at the documents, then at me. I did not want it to happen like this. I know, I said. You wanted it to happen quietly. You wanted control. She blinked. I just needed to feel like I had a voice, like I was not being stifled. Then you should have used yours, I said. Not his wallet, not their script. Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I stood. I will not drag this through court unless you make me, but everything in this folder is admissible. I have protections filed, assets locked, contracts audited. The company is clean. You will not touch it. Her jaw tensed. I am not the villain here, she said finally. No, I said. You are just someone who thought I would stay quiet. I placed the folder back into my bag, not a threat, just a closing act. She reached for her wine, then stopped. Do you hate me? I paused, not for drama, just to see if any part of me still felt what I used to. I do not know, I said, but I know I do not trust you, and I know that matters more now. I left the restaurant without touching the wine. Behind me, she sat in silence, staring at the space where her version of reality had just been dismantled. I did not need to strike first. She did that herself. 3 days after the confrontation, Thomas pulled his capital from her planned startup, quietly. No announcement. Just a retraction of interest and a note that he would be reallocating resources. In truth, his own marriage had cracked. His wife had received the anonymous documentation I had curated and forwarded through a legal intermediary. Clean, emotionless, time-stamped. He did not push back. He stepped away. I monitored from a distance. He severed public connections with her. Unfollowed her professional pages. Deleted comments he had once left beneath her growth content. Whatever plans they had, he erased them before they could turn into liabilities. Her coaching group, Evolve Her, surfaced briefly in a local news cycle. An investigative journalist, one I had anonymously tipped, ran a piece on emotional monetization in unregulated wellness circles. No names were printed, but the photo featured Tessa at a workshop. Just enough for anyone familiar to know where the shadows pointed. She stopped posting the next day. At home, she moved carefully, not with guilt, with uncertainty, like a person navigating a room where the floor might shift beneath them. We did not speak much. She asked once if I was going to make this public. I said nothing. The silence answered her. I had already spoken where it mattered. By the following week, she was living out of the guest room. Her family reached out once, concerned, vaguely confused. I kept my responses polite. She could tell her story however she wanted. I did not need to offer a competing version. Truth needs no advertisement. The most telling consequence came from her own circle. 2 friends distanced themselves. One sent me a message I did not reply to. I did not know how much of this was real. I am sorry. She was not exiled, but she was no longer invited. The myth of her self-actualization collapsed under its own weight. Because once you sell your integrity for strategy, you discover your audience was only loyal to the illusion. As for me, I did not rebuild overnight. I worked longer hours, refocused my team, expanded legal protections across all ventures. My lawyer reviewed every clause in every partnership. I restructured the business with survivability in mind. Emotionally, I kept my world small. One evening, I sat alone in the house and went through the binder one last time. Not to relive it, to catalog it, to close it without romanticizing what I had survived. She had said I was holding her back. Maybe I was, from destruction, from manipulation, from becoming someone who measured freedom by how cleanly she could erase me. In the end, she left the house on a Wednesday. No drama, no bags packed in haste. just silence. She closed the front door behind her the way someone closes a chapter they will never get to rewrite. I stood at the window and watched her walk to her car. She did not look back, and I did not need her to, because I had already let go, long before she knew she had lost her grip.